Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our regular Thursday lecture. I hope that your day is going great. We are here, of course, to help you learn more about opportunities to work in the United States through OPT and CPT. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me just briefly introduce myself. As some of you may already know, my name is Victoria, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Education USA network here in Ukraine. We are part of the global network of the US Department of State committed to promoting diversity in the US higher education system and building bridges of knowledge across borders. As the official source on US higher education, we of course offer accurate, comprehensive, and unbiased information about opportunities to study at accredited colleges and universities in the United States. We understand that the process of applying to the US universities is quite different from that in Ukraine. So we are here to help you every step of the process and answer any questions you may have. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the CPT and OPT opportunities specifically for international students. One of the most common questions we get asked is, can I work in the US while I'm studying or after I finish my studies? Well, the short answer is yes, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Two options that students can consider are, of course, the Curricular Practical Training, CPT, or Optional Practical Training, OPT. It is my pleasure to welcome Ketrין Hagíns, Associate Director at the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at George Washington University, to find out more about the differences between CPT and OPT, and who is, of course, going to share some opportunities on how you can apply to these programs and really make sure that you comply with your visa regulations. I would like to encourage you today to stay active, ask lots of questions. We would love to hear from you. And I'll, of course, make sure that we get to every single question at the end of today's presentation. Ketrין, it's such an honor to have you here with us today. Please take it away. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate that lovely introduction. And hello to everybody joining this stream today. For me, it's about 11 a.m. in the East Coast in the United States, in Washington, D.C. For all of you, I know it's a little later in the day. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come join and listen and learn a little bit about your opportunities in the U.S. if you choose to study here. So as Victoria said, my name is Ketrін Hagíns. I work at the Office of Graduate Admissions and Student Services here at George Washington in the School of Engineering. And I'm here to talk to you about CPT and OPT. So if I can get my presentation, there we go. Perfect. So let's get started. Here's a brief agenda that we're going to talk about. So it's a little short. I'm trying to be as concise as possible to make sure that you guys are learning everything you need to know without being overwhelmed with information. So we're going to talk briefly about what CPT is, what OPT is. I'll talk about what that timeline looks like when you're thinking about applying. And then we'll discuss the STEM extension that some of you may or may not already be aware of. And then at the end, I'll have a few slides about GW engineering, graduate programs, some information about what our campus is like, what the university is like, what programs we offer, how to apply. And then we'll move on to a Q&A where we'll open up the floor and you can ask Victoria and I any questions that you may or may not have about this topic, about applying to school in the US, traveling here, what have you. But to get started, let's talk about the CPT, OPT, and the STEM extension. If you don't know what those letters stand for, no worries. We're going to start right now with CPT, or Curricular Practical Training. CPT is specifically permission granted to F1 students to engage in an alternative work study, like an internship, off campus during your degree program. The most important thing to keep in mind about CPT is that it has to be related to your field of study. So, for example, if you're a computer science student here at GW and you apply for and are offered a job at McDonald's, that's great so long as it's something related to computer science. If it's a job for McDonald's corporate working on computer programming, you're solid, you're gold. If it's a job working their front window, serving burgers, that's not really related to computer science, it's not related to your field of study, it would not be eligible for CPT. So that's just a real easy example that I know my career services office always likes to share. But the reason why your job offer has to be related to your degree program is because the purpose of the CPT program is for you to gain practical experience in your field of work while you're still taking courses in your degree program. So, in fact, along with the requirement that it be directly related to your major, CPT must also be one of two things. It either has to be required to complete your degree program, so an internship or a practicum requirement that is an established part of your curriculum and something that the school requires you do before you can graduate, or it has to be an integral part of your learning experience. That can be a little bureaucratic and confusing. So what I mean when I say that is that CPT, this work experience, has to provide you with an opportunity to learn and gain hands-on practical experience in your field of study outside of the classroom, whether that is for credit because it's required, or it's simply an experience that you're doing in your own time, potentially during your summer or during your school year. We've talked a little bit about what CPT is, the actual words, the requirements about how you are eligible, but let's talk about how you qualify. So first and foremost, you have to be fully enrolled at a U.S. institution in the United States, and you have to be enrolled consecutively as a full-time student for the equivalent of one academic year. So GW interprets that as 2 full semesters. What that means is that for us, the summer term does not actually count as a full semester since it's typically a shorter term. And so what that means is that if you are a student who begins your studies in fall 2024 and you enroll in fall semester and spring semester as a full-time student, you would be eligible to engage in CPT during that first summer 2025. But if you were a student who was here in the United States right now, beginning your studies spring 2024, you would have to be enrolled in spring 2024, fall 2024, and then you wouldn't be eligible for CPT until spring 2025 because the summer, even if you took classes for GW, does not constitute as a full semester. Now, that might be different at other schools. It depends on the interpretation of the DSO. So I always strongly encourage you to speak to your designated school official at whatever U.S. institution you end up enrolling in if you choose to go to the U.S., or even speaking to the admissions officers during your application process to see how they understand these regulations. Also, of course, you have to be in valid F1 status. So you have to be meeting the requirements of your visa and maintaining your record with the help of your designated school official. So making sure you're fully enrolled in classes, you're attending school, you're maintaining your academic standing. All of those are things that will help you to be eligible for CPT. And last, you have to have already received an eligible job offer that meets the requirements that we discussed about it being related to your field of study and things of that sort. So you've met all of those requirements, you get the job offer. What does that actually mean for you? What does that look like? How long can you work? If it's during the academic term, you are limited to a maximum of 20 hours per week. That's because the US government and your university wants to ensure that you're focused on your academic studies first and foremost, and that you do well in school. So that's why there's a limit if you were to participate in CPT during the school year. If it's during an official school break or holiday, like the summer term, you are eligible to participate beyond 20 hours. Now, what that looks like is going to be different depending on the job you're in, but it just means that you are not maxed at that 20-hour limit. So some jobs, it might be 40 hours a week, which is full-time. Some might be 30. Some of my students go on and they like to do 60 hours of work a week. That sounds miserable to me, but more power to them. They seem to find joy in that. So that's certainly something you are allowed to do if it's offered. Now, don't forget that CPT needs to be authorized on a semester by semester basis. So what that means is that if you're authorized for the summer, you would have to be reauthorized for fall if you wanted to continue doing CPT. It's not something that you get authorized once and then can just happily move on and do it for the next year without checking in again. So you'll just need to make sure that you always apply for CPT authorization each time at the start of a new semester. Last, something really important to remember, if you engage in 12 or more months of full-time CPT at your current program level, you will not be eligible for OPT when you complete your studies. That's just a really big thing that I want to make sure you're aware of. There is a certain limit before it starts impacting your post-graduation opportunities. We'll talk a little bit more about what OPT looks like, but I just want to stress that you should consult with your DSO at your institution throughout the process to make sure that you are not crossing over that limit or it's not negatively impacting your future plans. Your DSO is going to be there to help you guide you through the entire process. For you, it's a new adventure, but for your DSO, they have a lot of experience helping students just like you. And so they really are the experts who are there to be a great resource for you. But so we've just spoken a little bit about CPT, which is during your academic program, but let's talk more about OPT, that optional practical training, that post-graduation opportunity. OPT is one of the more popular training programs for F1 students. It's a form of employment, often paid, that provides you with on-the-job training for your degree after you graduate. So the most common form of OPT, and the one I'm going to talk to you today, is post-completion OPT, which is exactly what it sounds like. Post-completion OPT essentially happens when you graduate. OPT has similar eligibility requirements as CPT. You have to be maintaining your active F1 status for at least 2 consecutive semesters or 1 full academic year. Like I mentioned before, you cannot have more than 12 months of full-time CPT. You have to physically be present in the US during the application process and apply within a specific permissible period. I promise I'll get to that in a minute, don't worry. And something to keep in mind, and what we stress to a lot of our students, is that during the application process, your university recommends you for OPT, but it's up to the US government to approve your OPT application. Just because you've received a recommendation from your university does not guarantee you USCIS approval. But if you are approved for OPT, you can receive up to 12 months of work authorization for each degree level you earn in the United States. So what does that mean when I say each degree level? Basically, if you were to come to the US and earn a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree, you would be eligible to receive up to 12 months of work authorization, so post-completion OPT, after each graduation. So you could do OPT after your bachelor's, you could do OPT again after your master's, and you could do OPT again after your PhD. OPT is a use it or lose it offering. That means if you graduate from your bachelor's degree in the spring and immediately begin a master's program in the fall, you are forfeiting that OPT opportunity for that year of work experience. You can't hold on to it, do your master's, and then go, okay, I have 2 years of OPT available to me because I didn't use my bachelor's OPT. That's not how it works. That's something to keep in mind when you're applying to programs in the US, if you're thinking about future programs staying in the US for consecutive degrees. This is because there are strict rules for when you can apply for OPT. Specifically, you can apply up to 90 days or 3 months prior to your program end date that's listed on your Form I-20. Most often that end date is going to be your date of graduation. And the deadline for USCIS to receive your full and complete OPT application is no more than 60 days after your program end date. This is known as the 60-day grace period. During the application process, you'll work with your DSO to determine a specific OPT start date, and this start date cannot be outside of that 60-day grace period. Keep in mind that if you are approved for OPT, you are not allowed to start work until you've received your employment authorization document, your EAD card, and until the start date on the card has arrived. Once you're approved, you can work up to 12 months on OPT for at least 20 hours per week or more, so long as you continue to keep your DSO up to date with your employment information and address. OPT is not the same as sponsorship, and it does not cost the employer thousands of dollars to hire you. Most of the work is actually on you to ensure that you're approved for OPT and that you're maintaining your status. It is a paper process, which can be a little tedious, but like I said when we were discussing CPT, work closely with your DSO. They are there to help you and to make this process as easy as possible. Now, like I said, this is a 12-month period. So here you can actually see that application workflow that we've been talking about before, about what that timeline looks like. I'm realizing I should have moved on to this slide a little earlier, so I apologize for that. So let's just briefly look at this. This is my bad. Apologies, guys. So you can see that those 90 days before you graduate is when you can first apply, and then 60 days after that is your application window. And then this is the date that you should be picking for your start date. You are then eligible for 12 months of OPT, so 1 year where you can remain in the United States on that F1 student visa and gain work experience, where you don't have to worry about getting a sponsorship, applying for H-1B, starting a new program. You're maintaining that current student record and working in the US. But as I've just said, OPT is up to 12 months of work experience. This is available for all F1 students who earn a degree at a US institution and maintain their F1 status. At the end of those 12 months, you'll reach your employment end date listed on your EAD card. And for many of you, you'll have a 60-day grace period to transfer to another school, change to a different visa category, or depart from the United States, return home, move to another country, whatever your plans may be. But for some of you, and some of you may already know this, some of you will qualify for the STEM OPT extension. So very briefly, what is STEM? If you're not familiar with the acronym, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. The STEM extension is exactly what it sounds like. F1 students who have earned a degree in a select few STEM programs are eligible to apply for an additional 24 months of OPT after completing the basic 12 months we just talked about. So you can extend your OPT if you've studied a STEM field. This means that those students who qualify for the STEM OPT extension will receive a total of 36 months or 3 years of work experience post-graduation. Now, as I mentioned, this is only for a select number of STEM degrees. The link on this slide actually provides you with a list of the eligible CIP codes for the STEM OPT extension. CIP, SIP, stands for Classification of Instructional Program. And when you receive an I-20, it will have a specific SIP code listed. The SIP code may not be the exact name of your school's majors. That's just because there's a very defined preset list by the US government, and your school's DSO will have carefully matched each program that your school offers by the university with the appropriate SIP code. So for example, at GW Engineering, we have our computer science program that I've mentioned. The matching SIP code is titled Computer and Information Sciences General. Sometimes I get students who get their I-20 and they reach back out to me and they're like, the major is wrong. Oh no. And I'm like, no, you're fine. It's correct. It's just the SIP code is not the exact same name as GW's major. But if you're ever worried, if it's ever wildly wrong, you can always ask your DSO and they'll double check for you. But the link that I mentioned has a list that will provide you with all of the degree programs that are eligible for the additional 24 months of OPT for the STEM extension. If you are accepted to a program, you can use your I-20 to check if your program is one of the approved STEM extension programs by reviewing this list. Or you can even ask your school that you're applying to or researching or admitted to and see what their STEM extension eligible programs are. So for example, GW Engineering, all of our graduate programs are eligible for the STEM extension. So that's something to be aware of. But just remember, this is not the same as sponsorship. Throughout your OPT, you will be maintaining your F1 status at the same institution you earned your degree from. It's only after you've reached the end of OPT or the end of your OPT STEM extension, if you want to stay and not continue in education, but potentially stay for work, that's when you would need to discuss your sponsorship options with your employer, look at H-1B, those kind of opportunities. But until that point, on your F1 student visa, you are eligible for all of these internship and work experiences that I've talked about, CPT, OPT, and potentially the STEM extension, depending on your program. But from there, let's transition a little bit and just talk briefly about GW itself, so you can learn more about my institution and maybe see if it might be of interest to you. I promise I'm going to try and keep this brief. I know you were here to talk about CPT and OPT. But to start, George Washington University was founded in 1821 by an act of Congress. We are unique in that we actually are predominantly a graduate institution. So we have about 10,000 students studying at the undergraduate level and about 15,000 students studying at the master's and PhD level. We're located in the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. So we're about 5 blocks away from the White House where President Biden lives, 2 blocks away from the World Bank, the IMF. Our friends at the State Department are also down the street from where I'm sitting right now. Unsurprisingly, partly due to our location, we have a lot of students who enroll at GW because they want to pursue internship and work experiences during their studies in DC. So that's certainly something that we're very familiar with. Our career services team and our international services office are very familiar with the CPT and OPT processes. But again, as I mentioned, I work specifically for the School of Engineering and Applied Science. So we have 6 academic departments where we offer 11 different fields of study. We have over 80 tenured and tenure track faculty members and have over $32 million in research spending this past year. Our different departments offer a number of different programs, and we have faculty who are working in the field. They are doing research actively. Some of them are even working in their industries while they are teaching courses here. So it's a great opportunity for you to get to some hands-on experience and get to work with people who are actively doing the work in the field that you're interested in. So I'm currently in our Science and Engineering Hall right now. This is our main hub for GW Engineering. This is where the majority of our classes are held. This is where our faculty have their offices. This is where our staff, like myself, have our offices as well, so students can come and access us at any point. This is a Gold LEED certified building, not quite as new as it was when I first started here. It opened in January 2015. But we have a number of different labs that our students can do work in and research. So we have a class 100 nanofabrication clean room. We have some high imaging resolution suites. And we have a high bay with a strong wall and strong floor. So if you are a civil engineering student, that might make you very excited. We've got plenty of students who do research into earthquake preparedness with that high bay. And that's right downstairs from where I'm sitting right now. But that's just an example of how the Science and Engineering Hall is really there to encourage interdisciplinary research. We also have labs from the other hard sciences on campus that are up on our top floors. So the School of Medicine has some research labs in here. So do our Milken School of Public Health. You know, we've got faculty and students doing research with a number of different programs on campus right here in this building. So to speak very briefly, because I know it's a question that a lot of students have when it comes to funding, GW Engineering offers merit-based tuition discounts to students who are eligible and competitive applicants. At the point of admission for master's programs, students are considered for those merit scholarships that range from 25% to 50%, all the way upwards to 75%, but obviously the higher the award amount goes, the fewer number of awards we are able to offer. There is no separate application. If you apply for admission, you will be considered for funding. It is merit-based, so that means that we will do a holistic review of your application and make that decision not just on your CGPA and your undergraduate studies, but also your letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, resume. All of that information will come into play. Doctoral funding is a little different. That's where you see the more traditional teaching or research assistantships that come with full funding, with a living stipend and things of that sort. PhD funding is going to be decided by the faculty specifically. So again, no separate application, but it will be determined by the faculty, the needs of the department when you're applying. There are, of course, other funding sources outside of GW and the university. I always encourage students to take a look at what those might be. So, of course, we have students who are Fulbright awardees. We have government and military-sponsored students, students who are being sponsored by their employees, And then, of course, we have students who are on educational loans and things of that sort. So I encourage you to check our website and see if you have any questions you might want, but we certainly list a couple different options or suggestions of what we know our students have done in the past. Here's just a brief list of all of the programs that we offer at GW Engineering. Unless it says MS only, we do offer it at both the PhD and master's level. So our popular programs, of course, are going to be computer science, mechanical and aerospace engineering, civil and environmental engineering, cybersecurity. All of those are great options to keep in mind. Admissions requirements shouldn't be very new if you've been looking at US schools already. But just very briefly, I wanted to let you know that for watching today's session, you do qualify for a fee waiver. That code is going to be EdUSA Ukraine 24. So if you use that, you'll be able to save yourself a little bit of money when you submit your application. Otherwise, we do require students to submit English language test scores. We'll accept TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo. The GRE is optional for MS applicants, but it is required for PhD. For letters of recommendation, we require 2 at the master's level, 3 for PhD, and then otherwise students are required to submit a copy of their statement of purpose, resume, CV, copies of your unofficial transcripts from each institution previously attended at the higher education level, and then you must have the equivalent of a 4-year bachelor's degree in the US. I know in Europe that sometimes looks like that is a 3-year degree. So long as it's still equivalent, that's fine. And you can always reach out to us and ask if you're worried that maybe your degree isn't eligible. Otherwise, our deadlines never change. So the fall deadline is always going to be January 15th. And the spring deadline will always be September 1st. The one thing I want to be clear is that for fall, right now, we're doing our app reviews. We are continuing to accept master's applications at this point in time. PhD is unfortunately closed, but master's, we will continue to accept late applications. So please feel free, if you're still interested in fall 2024, you are welcome to submit an application. We will consider you. And then last, I just really wanted to briefly talk about our W. Scott Amy Career Services Center, because they are people who would be of great help to you if you were to come to GW and be interested in a CPT or pursuing OPT. They are a wonderful resource who are there to provide career guidance from dedicated career coaches. They will help you with reviewing your cover letters, building your resume. They'll do mock interview preps. They have many connections with industry leaders here in DC and around the US. And their website actually has information about all of our programs and data about where our students go on after they graduate, what companies they work for, their average salary, things like that. So if you wanted to go see what the average outcome was for a student from our mechanical and aerospace engineering program, you can actually find that information on our website. And it's really great. They will also organize graduate school or career fairs for graduate students. And they always host at least once a year or so. They do an international only career fair where they bring companies to campus who are exclusively familiar with the CPT and OPT process, that you are already talking to people who understand what you're going through. So no matter whether you attend GW, maybe, or another school, please, please, please utilize their career services office, because they are a great resource there for you. But that's it for my prepared presentation. I am so grateful that you all were here to listen to it. I hope it was interesting and maybe made the process a little less daunting. But thank you very much. And I see Victoria's camera has turned back on, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have at this point.
Thank you so much, Ketrin, for a fantastic presentation. I highly enjoyed it and learned so much myself. So I would just like to encourage our lovely viewers at home to please feel free to send out your questions. We would love to hear from you and chat to you. And I already see the first question. So the student is wondering, what is an I-20? And can you tell us more about this and its features?
Yeah, of course. So as an international student, if you come to study in the United States, you will most likely study on an F1 student visa. This is a non-immigrant student visa. It is the most common type of visa that students tend to have when they pursue education in the United States. So to receive an F1 student visa, you need to work with the institution that you choose to enroll in to receive what's known as a Form I-20. This is a government document that the school issues on your behalf that has all of your biographic information, your programmatic information, your financial information. Basically, it's a 3-page document that summarizes everything that you're planning to do in the United States at the specific school. So it'll have your start date, your end date. It'll say who's funding you. It'll say what you're studying, where you're going to be located, address, all of that. Once you receive that Form I-20 from your institution, you're going to use that document because it'll have a specific CVIS ID number that will be your number for your entire time in the US. And you will use that to apply for your F1 student visa at your local US embassy or consulate. So that's the Form I-20. The other thing I want to say is that the visa, the F1 visa that you receive, as I said, it's a non-immigrant student visa. So that means that you're specifically saying that you're coming to the US to study. You're not intending to immigrate or move here for the rest of your life. But the other thing to be aware of is the visa has to be valid when you enter the United States. But the I-20 is the living and breathing document that needs to be valid for the entire time you're in the US. So if you enroll in, say, a PhD program at GW, our PhD programs are typically 5 years. You might receive an F1 student visa that's 2 years long. So long as you are maintaining a valid I-20 while you're in the US, you don't need to worry about renewing your F1 visa until you've left the country. So if you go home for a long summer break after 3 years and that F1 visa was 2 years long, then you need to get a new visa. But if you, for whatever reason, feel really strongly about staying in the US for all 5 years, your visa expires 2 years in, until you leave the country, so long as your I-20 is valid, that's okay. So long as it's being renewed every year, you're being certified that you're in classes, that's fine. The I-20 is the document that allows you to legally remain in the United States during your studies and during OPT.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for such an informative answer. And I just want to add that if you have any more questions about specifically different visa types and how you can apply for a visa, please feel free to reach out to our lovely advisors and sign up for a free consultation. Education USA is always here to help you and assist you on your journey to US study. And we move on with the questions. I actually have one of my own, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of our students often wonder about opportunities to work on campus. So I was wondering, is there a chance for international students to work on the campus of the JW School of Engineering and Applied Sciences?
Yeah, of course. So working on campus, very different from CPT. You are allowed as an F1 student to start working on campus from your very first day of classes. That's perfectly fine. It is not the same in terms of waiting a year to work off campus. So we have a number of international students who engage in on-campus work. And that can look very, very depending on the type of job you apply for. We have students who work in our library. We have students who work with our GWPD, our police department, who help with security. We have students like in my office who work at our front desk and answer the phone and help with filing documents. We have students who work at the gym. I mean, whatever you can conceive of, so long as there's a posting for a student position, you can apply for it. As a student at GW, and this is, I'm sure, the same at almost any other institution, once you've accepted your offer and enrolled, you'll typically get access to the job platform like a month or so before classes start, and then you'll be able to start applying for positions on campus. And you are welcome to apply to as many of those as you want. They are obviously competitive. We don't have enough jobs to hire all 25,000 of our students, but you are certainly welcome to do so from day one of your studies.
Thank you so much for your answer, Catherine. And another question I often get from students about CPT and OPT programs would be about whether they can impact the chances of a student to obtain a scholarship, especially if they're planning to continue their studies and move to an advanced level of degree. So, for instance, if they do an OPT after their bachelor's degree, can that in some way impact positively their chances of obtaining a scholarship when they apply for a master's program?
Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly it can have an impact because it is experience that you're gaining in your field of study. So, this is an aspect that you'll be able to add to your resume. This is an experience that you'll get to have where you've been working in your field, gaining hands-on practical experience. This can only be a net positive, I think. I can't see it negatively impacting your chances. It's certainly something that can help you to really round out your background and your experience. It's always great when students have work experience, in my opinion. So we like to see that you've gone out and you've done a little bit more.
Thank you so much for such a motivating answer. And we've got another question from the students. So student is wondering, are the requirements for undergraduate and graduate students the same? I believe when it comes to applying for an OPT or CPT program.
Yes. So in terms of applying for OPT and CPT, I believe they are the same. I am not a designated school official. So again, I'm going to push that no matter what institution you end up going to, you should closely work with your DSO at your international services office. They'll be there to help you to make sure that you are following the timeline that you need to follow, that you're getting all the documents in that you need, that you're following the necessary processes. They are a great resource. I know my DSO, they like to do information sessions throughout the semester to make students aware of what's coming up. And we also have something that's unique about GW Engineering, actually. All of our students have an academic faculty advisor, somebody in your field of study who is teaching classes and doing research that you have a relationship with as your advisor. We also have a team of professional advisors in my office who actually work with you about, the logistics of being a graduate student, and they can actually help you with the CPT and OPT process as well. So I would just always say, undergrad or grad, whatever level you're in, please make sure that you're engaging with the resources on campus, because they're going to be the people who are going to help you to make sure you're doing everything correctly.
Thank you so much for your answer, Catherine. And I would just like to reiterate that communication with your DSO is key to making sure that you comply with all the requirements and, of course, get the best chance of being accepted to your program and completing it successfully. So the next question we have is from a different student who's wondering, what about working in labs? Sometimes professors hire PhD students to work in labs. Is that considered to be CPT?
Yeah, so that would typically be considered to be on-campus employment. That's different. We have students who are admitted to their programs with, especially our PhD students who get admitted with a fellowship or anything that requires they work in their professor's lab. That's not the same as CPT. That is on-campus work. Now, if your professor wanted to hire you in their external job that they might be doing, that's different. That would be CPT, and you would have to wait for that year of eligibility and go through the CPT process. But on-campus labs, different.
Thank you so much for your answer. And another question I often hear from students is about applying to a graduate program, or in particular to a master's program, when the bachelor's degree they have obtained is different from that of the program. So for instance, if they're applying for a STEM program but have a degree in liberal arts, what are some of the steps they need to take to really buff up their application and make sure they get the best chance of being accepted?
Yeah, that is a question I get all the time too. So great to hear you're hearing it as well. In the United States, it's really common for students to change their mind between their degree levels. That happens all the time. What you studied when you were 18 maybe isn't what you're interested in studying when you're 26. For example, I did my undergraduate degree in English literature, and then I got my master's in international education, which was a very different field for me in terms of the type of papers I had to write. But that's really common. So if you're switching from one degree field to another, what I would always stress is for your application, one, make sure that you review our websites, because we're not trying to hide any information from you. We do make clear if there are prerequisites that are required. None of our programs require that you have a specific major in your undergraduate study, but there are some that require that you have certain classes. So computer science, for example, we like to see some mathematics, some lab sciences, programming especially is something that we like to see. So if that's not in your undergraduate study, you might want to take some 4-credit classes at a local university over a summer or something to maybe beef up that application. Otherwise, you can also always stress, I always say, use the other aspects of your application. You can't change things that happened in the past. You can't go back and change what your undergraduate major was. You can't change the grade you got in that class your freshman year. But you can control what you write in your statement of purpose. You can control who you ask to write you a letter of recommendation. You can control what you choose to highlight in your resume and CV. So using those aspects of your application to highlight maybe areas that you think make you a good fit for this program, any work experience or projects that you've worked on that really did help, that's something to highlight. Letters of recommendation from somebody potentially in the field is definitely going to be of help, because that's somebody with authority on this subject matter who can really speak to your ability to succeed in that area of study. And then using your statement of purpose to really explain and make clear to the faculty what your logic is. Why are you making this change? Somebody looking at your application and seeing, oh, okay, they studied history and now they want to get a master's in computer engineering. What happened there? Your statement of purpose is really the place where you can explain, yeah, that's what I did in undergrad, but then I joined a club and we built computers, and then I got a job in this field, and actually I learned all these things that I love, and this is why I want to make that change. That can really help to construct a narrative for the faculty to understand what you're hoping to get out of this master's program. So changing your field, totally understandable, happens all the time. You do need to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of the program and that you're really highlighting your strengths. That can always help.
Thank you so much for such a detailed and informative answer. And I guess the final question on my part would be about assistantships. I know a lot of aspiring Ukrainian students, especially those who are looking to apply for a graduate program, are wondering how can they signal in their applications that they're really interested in doing an assistantship, or are there any extra requirements they can fulfill?
Yeah, okay, so for us, what I would say again, answer is always going to be different depending on the school you apply to. What GW considers an assistantship might be different from, say, what NYU considers an assistantship. Just make sure that you're reaching out to the school and asking and getting information. For GW engineering, assistantships are typically going to be reserved for doctoral students at the point of admission. Like I talked about, we offer merit-based scholarships for master's students. That's just going to be a tuition discount. It won't come with any work requirements or anything like that. Assistantships will more typically at the point of admission be for students pursuing a PhD. Now, that doesn't mean that master's students can't get an assistantship eventually. It just typically won't happen until they've already been in the program for some time. Typically, you've been in the program for a year, you've developed a relationship with your faculty, they invite you to apply for an opening in their lab, or they ask you to be a TA, or things like that. So I always stress that you should make sure that you are developing a relationship with your faculty, going to those office hours, making sure you speak up in class, participating. I know that can be hard. I don't always like talking in class, but it's good to make sure that they know who you are when you say your name. And also just, my faculty likes to say, letting them know that you're interested in that. When you're starting classes, reaching out to somebody who's doing research in a lab and work you're interested in, speaking up, going to those office hours, sending that email. It can't hurt to let them know that you're interested, and they can't know that you want to do it if you're silently waiting for them to pick you. So I would just say, and that's the same for any research opportunities on campus, just making sure that you are being vocal, you're developing those relationships, you're reaching out. You know, in my experience, I mentioned I got my master's in international ed here at GW. I took a class with a faculty member, you know, went to office hours, talked to him a bunch, kind of kept in touch with him after I finished the class. And about 6 months later, so he reached out to me and was like, I'm doing a research project on the same area that you wrote your final paper in. Would you like to join me and do research with me? Which was something I was not planning, but was a great opportunity and wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been so engaged in that class and with that professor. So that's just a real world example of how it can really help to make sure that you are doing well in class as well as thinking about what you want to do outside of it.
Thank you so much for once again sharing great material and resources that students can use, and for providing such fantastic examples, real life examples that students can really use to motivate themselves to speak up and to really build these connections with their future professors. So a last call for questions. While we wait, I would just like to say that we here at Education USA are here to support you 100% of the way. So if you're just beginning your journey to US study, please feel free to sign up for a free consultation, to browse through our free resources, to look into the different cohort programs that we are offering that can help you completely free of charge, of course, to really get to know the education, the US system of higher education, like inside and out, and to get a real understanding of what you need to succeed in your application. We would love to see you and hear from you. And while we wrap up, Catherine, do you have any final words of encouragement for the students?
I mean, what I would say is that you guys are already doing great work by taking time out of your Thursday evening to attend sessions like this. Victoria mentioned that they do lecture series every Thursday. So keeping up with those, making sure that if there's something interested, you're participating and asking questions, that's always a great first step. And the other thing I would just encourage you to do is, if you have any questions, ask them. Reach out to Victoria at EdUSA, reach out to my office, reach out to whatever school you're applying to. We are here to be a source of support for you and a resource, and we want to help you go through this process. I know it can be daunting. I know it can be a little intimidating, but we're here to help you. And I hope that this was a good introduction to some very big, scary topics.
Yes, to be sure. Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing some great materials and for sharing your knowledge with the students. I highly enjoyed it. And as I said, we would love to see you in our next sessions. Next week, we are planning a general introductory session on admission policies in the US with representatives from Temple University and Dartmouth College. So we would love to have you with us. Stay safe, stay with Education USA. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to our lovely advisors. And if you're interested in applying in particular to the GW School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, I will make sure that I put you in contact with the right person, well, maybe Catherine in this case, and of course that you get the best chance of getting accepted to your dream program. So keep believing in yourself, and of course, take care. Bye, and see you next week.
Thank you.